Welcome to On the X. Today's episode is a compilation focused on how the brain responds under extreme pressure. We'll hear from Laird Hamilton, who pioneered tow-in surfing and has faced some of the largest waves on the planet. Tommy Caldwell, a professional rock climber who survived being held captive in Kyrgyzstan during an expedition. And Dr. Nicholas Wright, a neuroscientist studying stress, fear, and resilience. We start with Laird Hamilton. Beyond just surfing, he spent decades navigating life and death situations in the ocean, from 50 to 60-foot waves to encounters with dangerous currents. He's known not just for his athletic feats, but for the way he manages fear and anxiety in the moment, and how the brain can stay calm and focused when the stakes are extremely high. So here we go with Laird Hamilton on the X. We can let our emotions or our instincts maybe run away from us in the form of fear and anxiety, right? Like that can overwhelm you to the point where it incapacitates you. And certainly for someone like you, who you put yourself in sort of in death-defying situations where it's perfectly rational to be completely terrified. So how do you deal with that? Like, I'm curious, both from sort of a surfing perspective of like, you know, when you're out there and there's some, whatever it is, 50, 60-foot wave behind you that clearly can kill you, how you control that in that moment. And then again, like just kind of like for the rest of us that, that aren't able to do that, you know, how we kind of temper that in other situations where it's maybe not, you know, there's no real imminent danger there, but we get that feeling, right? Like where it can kind of like run away from us.
You know, and I think there's a separation between those two things. I think there's that voice that runs all the runs all the garbage that,
Yeah.
hey, this, and you got to be careful of that. And you got to, and all that anxiety based kind of chatter.
Yep.
And then the actual real intuition, the real, hey, like these real, and because there's a difference between those two. Those are, I always talk, and in a way, I'll talk about different kinds of fear, a fear that makes you more alert and makes you make better decisions. That's good fear.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's bad fear, which makes you freeze up and be hasty to make the wrong decision. And so I think that those are different things. I think there's a different thing between your intuition and then this anxiety that we have some sayings like, don't to react to what hasn't happened yet.
Yep, for sure.
It's like, because then you'll have to react to the reaction that you had,
right,
versus and I use a little wave. I use a scenario where you're paddling and a little tiny ripple is coming from a boat, and a beginner will always do this. They'll see the wave coming and it hasn't even gotten to them, and all of a sudden they start like responding to that wave. It hasn't even hit them. Like, instead of just waiting until it hits you and then you roll with it and respond to the movement. But I do really believe there's a big separation between, or at least my experience is, that chatter voice, that thing that's just running all the that really fuels anxiety, and then just those intuitions of, hey, be aware around this next corner, or you know what, that thing, just those, that voice that is, it's different than the other the intuitive part is different than this other chatter, this other chatter that happens that really builds anxiety. And I think it's the ability to block out that chatter, or at least be realistic about what that is, that's actually just a thing to try to keep you safe. So it's going to run all these scenarios, so you go, oh yeah, that's just a mechanism. That's not me. That voice that you think is you isn't you.
Right.
It's not you.
Yeah.
It's not you. It's this other mechanism that's trying to keep you safe, because it doesn't want to rely on your consciousness, because you're just not, none of us are that. We just can't, we're not that smart in that sense. So we're like, you know what? And that's like the reptilian part of the brain. It's like, hey, you're not smart enough to be consciously able to keep yourself alive. So I'm going to step in and give you the rhetoric that makes you hurry up and, hide in your closet, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, has that ever been, given the things you've done, has that ever been an issue for, again, when you started doing what you do and you're out there in these, was anxiety or fear ever an issue? Or are you just somebody who's like, I'm good, I'm fearless type of
No,
just
no, because I think, I mean, honestly, fear is assessment. I think when somebody, like, there was a campaign, used to be a campaign in certain, in action sports, where it was like the no fear,
yeah,
and
right, yeah.
I'm like, no fear. I go, that's ignorance. For me, I go, if you're saying you're not scared, that's stupid. Like, I would be like, you're not scared if you're flying, 150 feet on a motorbike and you're trying to land between two trash cans on a rail, and either way, on the right or the left is, is hospitalization or death. Or you're riding a giant wave, or there's a shark, or what. I mean, I think that's honest, right? That's being realistic about your, good assessment. But then it's, what is that energy that you use? How do you take that fear? I always say, like, if you watch a gazelle is, I mean, the cheetah is the fastest animal in the world, and the gazelle gets away a
Yep.
lot.
Yep.
Like, they get away a lot. So that's what fear can do. Fear can make you strong, can make a mom lift a car. I mean, it can make your assessment go into hyperspace. So fear is great when harnessed like that, or unless you just seize up and, the deer in the headlight, and you just get run over. So I think there is definitely, fear is a tool. I think I have been fortunate in growing up, having been scared a lot and consistently as a young person, especially in the ocean, on the land, but in the ocean, and to a point where I think that I cultivated a relationship with it. So over time, because I always say, you think you're scared, like, a scary movie is always scarier for a child.
Yeah.
So you're in the most vulnerable time of, if you're in the fear state when you're young, right? And then you turn into, you kind of, what do they say when the dolphins are attacked? They put the moms and the babies in the middle, the adults around, and then the very outside is young adolescent male.
Yep.
Because they're the fearless ones, right? They're the fearless ones. But there's a certain ability that some of us have, to turn that off too, to be like, hey, okay, cool, but I'm, and whether it's you've never been hurt and you think you're invincible, or you just have a mechanism. I think males specifically, and a certain percentage of males have an ability to be able to just to, like, turn that off, like, be like, turn the doubt off, and kind of, throw yourself into it, to throw, but I think for myself, growing up, being scared a lot, and then cultivating a relationship with it. If you're a little kid and you're stuck in a riptide and no one's around and you're there, flipping out and being scared isn't going to get you back in.
Right. Yep.
You realize that that's probably going to make it a problem, actually. So you learn how to do some things in that state. One of them is, stop, like assess, like really kind of look at what's going on and where you are, to make a decision to try to get yourself out of that situation, and instead of continuing to speed into it. So I think slowing down at times that's always worked well. But again, I think my upbringing and all of those times that I've had help me have a better relationship with it.
Behind every mission is a family carrying the weight at home through deployments and constant uncertainty. Donor funding helps provide counseling, childcare, education, and crisis support when it's needed most. You're not just a donor, you are that warrior. Learn how you can get involved at NavySealFoundation.org. Next, we'll hear from Tommy Caldwell. Tommy is a professional rock climber who survived being held captive in Kyrgyzstan during an expedition. Over 6 days, he and his fellow climbers were forced to navigate hunger, extreme terrain, and life-or-death decisions. In this clip, Tommy walks us through what was going on in his mind as he tried to stay alive and make critical decisions under stress.
It was like I said, 30 miles from the nearest road.
Yeah. And they didn't even, you basically ate nothing the 6 days that you were with them, right? Did they just not have any food? Like, were they?
Yeah. So there was 4 captors at first, and
Okay.
the first thing they did is they took us back to our base camp, because we had a base camp in the valley and then we were camped up on the wall. They took us back to our base camp, and they had like gorged themselves on our base camp food. They had hiked over a whole valley to get to us, so they were pretty tired and hungry by the time they got to us. And they raided our camp. They'd eaten a ton of our food, and then they told us to pack backpacks for a journey, bring sleeping bags and some food and our passports. And this was all just done through hand gestures. And then
Yep.
we packed up our tents, and we're starting to like hide our tents away when these helicopters started to fly over. And when that happened, we just dropped everything and ran. Like we just left. We didn't even have the backpacks with us. We just left everything, and they didn't have hardly anything. They had abandoned all their stuff as well. So they
Okay.
didn't have any food. We didn't have any food, and the Kyrgyz military was hunting us. So yeah, that's kind of how it played out.
How did your mindset change over that time? Because you eventually get to this point where you have to push this guy off a cliff basically to save yourselves and get rescued eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it went from confusion at first, wondering what was happening, to kind of like this surreal fear. Like when we were packing up our base camp, they had taken that Kyrgyz military outpost hostage that was in the valley, and he was with us. He was one of the hostages as well. And he had blood on his pants, and he was trying to tell us through hand gestures that basically they had already killed his friends. And so we're hearing this and we're like, are we hearing him right? Like, did this actually happen? And then when the battle started, we saw them kill him, like shoot him in the head. And we had to sit on his body for like 3 hours as this battle raged around us. So that moment was just like this kind of mind numbing, surreal fear, like this something that was so out of anything I had expected that it still doesn't feel real in my mind in a way. When I think back about it, I was like, is that the kind of thing I watched in a movie? It just, I think your body just copes with it in these ways. And then we fled that battle when it got dark, and we went to these 6 days of just surviving. Like we were terrified, but then we had these moments of finding confidence that we were going to find ways to escape. And Jason, kind of the lead member, the guy who had put together the whole expedition, really believed that we were going to find a way to overcome our captors and actually escape. So he was constantly talking strategy and looking at the guns and figuring out where the safeties were, and talking about picking up rocks and beating them over the head, or getting up, we're in a very steep cliffy terrain, pushing them off cliff, like all these things. He's just constantly strategizing ways to get out of there. And then each night we would be separated into two groups.
Mhm.
Like two of the climbers would be hiding in one group, and two would be hiding in another group. And that was definitely strategic on the point of our captors, because we couldn't strategize together that
Sure.
way.
Yep. Yep.
And so the whole time we're just surviving. But then I think we also realized in some level that we were more comfortable in the terrain than they were. Like we were these
Yep.
trained mountain climbers, and we were having to actually help them through the terrain at times. And we're like, this could be an advantage. So yeah. And then for me, like we got really weak, right? Over 6 days, we got really weak. We got really tired. But then I remember on the sixth night, I like this survival instinct kicked in or something, and I felt this clarity. I felt this incredible energy. I was like, there's actually a lot left in there, in a place that I never would have known I had if I hadn't been put in that situation. So then you kind of get levels of confidence. And yeah, I mean, over 6 days, kind of everything goes through your mind. The captors themselves weren't hugely mean to us, like they weren't able to take care of us, and it was very clear that we had to do what they said, but they weren't yelling at us, they weren't punching us, they weren't pushing us around per se. They were just surviving, and even in some level relying with us. Like I had managed to shove like 6 energy bars in my pocket, and so we would split that between the rebels and us every night, and they let that happen. They let me keep
Oh,
a
wow.
hold of them. They shared them with us, and in some ways, like the whole crew of our 4 captors, or our 2 captors in the end, like 2 of them disappeared. So we had 6 of us, like our 2 captors and then the 4 climbers. We were all kind of surviving together, and we had convinced them that we were all on the same team. Like they didn't think that there was any chance that we were going to try and overcome them by the end. They thought we were just all together.
When you were faced with that decision of having to push this guy off a cliff, how hard was that? Because I feel like this is one of these things where I think anybody that's removed from a situation like that, and they sort of like a what if hypothetical situation, they feel like, oh yeah, I would know exactly what to do. And I just don't think that that's true. I think that's got to go. There's got to be a lot of wrestling that goes on with that.
I mean, I suppose if you're trained for it, maybe you know more, but I mean, it was like I had this moral dilemma, right? Like
Hmm.
I knew that to escape, we would have to do something to harm them or kill them, and I didn't like the idea of that. And my girlfriend Beth didn't like the idea of that. Plus, it seemed risky. Like the whole idea of taking action towards them might go wrong, and they might shoot us or something. And
Yeah.
so it seemed really risky. Jason, on the other hand, didn't seem to have the moral dilemma at all. But the final night when we were climbing up this huge mountainside and we're like above big cliffs the whole time, it's like very obvious that this is our opportunity. He was like, we made this whole plan where Beth and I were kind of like up ahead, finding the route up the mountain, finding the easiest route up the mountain, and we're helping. There was just one remaining captor at this point get up the mountain, and the plan was for us to just find the way, and then they would look for an opportunity. The two other climbers would look for an opportunity to push our captor off a cliff, but they couldn't do it. Like it was just, I don't know exactly what it was. Like maybe they thought it was too risky, and so we were on the verge of hypothermia at this point. I knew we weren't going to last much longer. So as soon as I overcame the moral dilemma and decided this is functionally what we needed to do to survive, it just happened. Like it didn't feel like the risk side of it really held me back. So I don't know. I think every personality handles that differently.
Yeah. What
But
was
then
the
after I clicked him, I was like, oh my god, what have I just done? Like I
Well, yeah. So, I mean, like watching that video and seeing kind of you talk about that, and obviously this is something that happened at this point 25 years ago or close to that.
yeah.
But you talk about you and Beth having PTSD essentially after this, and I don't know how long that went on, but what was that like for you, and how does it sit now with you? And were there things that you did to kind of get through that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I came back from that trip and my parents and the whole climbing community, they're just like, "What has happened to you guys?" Like this,
Yeah.
they didn't know anything like that. Everybody's like treating us with like kitty gloves. They're like, "You
Yeah.
must
Yeah.
be so traumatized." My girlfriend was pretty traumatized. I was like, I didn't know what to think. I was like, I felt traumatized, I guess. Like emotionally, it was a lot for sure, but I didn't like hold it in my body. Like I've done a little bit of research on PTSD since then, and I don't actually think I ever experienced like the physical symptoms. I didn't have
Mm.
nightmares. I didn't like spiral downhill. Like none of that stuff really happened to me. My girlfriend did though, for sure, and I feel like the other two members of the expedition did as well. And it's interesting. And just in the past few months, I've gotten curious about that again in a way. And I had a friend recommend a book to me, like a psychology book, or like a book called "Waking the Tiger," that's all about PTSD. And I
Mm.
read it and had this really interesting case study of these kids that got trapped in a mine.
Oh
They
yeah.
were off a school bus, got that whole study, got trapped in
Yeah.
a mine. They did studies on them about PTSD, and the one that didn't really experience it in the same way was the one that kind of orchestrated their escape. And I'm like, maybe I escaped the really detrimental aspects of PTSD because I was in the situation that I was able to like take action in the moment to save us, which kind of purged that from my mind and body. Like now I have
Hmm.
this confidence in my life that when things get really bad, I'm gonna know what to do. I'm gonna be able to react, and that goes a long way towards not experiencing PTSD. Possibly, this is kind of my hypothesis at this point. And in fact, the book really talks about how trauma can be this incredible force for like awakening in a lot of ways. And I feel like I got that. I feel like I had that. Like my climbing, my my life in general, like I was so much more driven. I had this zest for life after Kyrgyzstan that fueled so much of where I am today, and I feel
Yeah.
kind of lucky in that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had never thought about that as an idea of like if you're the one, I don't know, maybe in control of the situation, so to speak, right? Who sort of takes action, maybe that has some impact on the outcome of that experience. You know, I mean, for someone that's been in the veteran community, obviously for whatever, and in the military for 20 plus years, 25 years, I have kind of my own take on that of like how PTSD comes about, and I think a lot of it has to do with sort of the interpretation we build around whatever may have happened later on in life. And then I think the sort of the emotional processing of it is the other piece, like what you're talking about, like the holding in of the emotional aspect of it, I think is the other thing. So
Yeah.
But
And another thing worth mentioning is like right after I got out of Kyrgyzstan, I spent about a year just like trying to do the thing that I loved, which was climbing,
mm,
mostly kind of solo. And it did feel like a coping mechanism in a way. But what I ended up doing is just going to El Cap and just spending my time largely alone up on El Cap, working towards these climbing projects in a focused way that I hadn't been able to. Like I didn't talk to friends, I didn't do anything but focus on kind of my craft of rock climbing, and therefore I excelled hugely. Like it was the biggest period of growth in my professional, my professional climbing life that I've ever had because I was just trying to cope, I guess.
I want to pause for a moment and acknowledge a brand that's doing something you don't see very often anymore. GHOSTBED didn't just sponsor an episode. They stepped up to support the entire IRONCLAD network, and that matters. GHOSTBED is built by people who care deeply about quality. It's a product-first company led by Mark Warner, who still shows up every day obsessed with doing things the right way. Their mattresses are all made in America, engineered with advanced cooling technology, breathable materials, and zero shortcuts. They have 3 different collections to choose from, and they've built an online sleep quiz, so you can dial in exactly what works for your body. And behind it all is a real in-house team of sleep experts, never outsourced. Right now, we have an exclusive offer for our listeners that beats any other discount out there. Go to ghostbed.com/onthex and use code ONTHEX for an extra 15% off site-wide. When you support them, you're not just buying a mattress. You're supporting the kind of companies that keep independent, high-stakes storytelling alive.
finally, we take a scientific look at the brain in such extreme situations. Dr. Nicholas Wright is a neuroscientist and clinician who studies how stress and fear affect cognition and decision-making. He breaks down what happens in the brain during extreme pressure, why fear can both help and hinder us, and how understanding these mechanisms can improve mental performance in everyday life.
Outside of that, what else should we be thinking about when it comes to just how war shapes our brain, right? Like how it changes our brain.
So I think there are 2 different ways that we can think about it. So one is that every brain is a really more basic thing, which is that every brain is built to survive and hopefully win a fight, right? And the reason for that is that throughout human prehistory and history, many people have many humans faced life-threatening emergencies, and so the whole of our brain is built of survival grade neural machinery. If it wasn't, we wouldn't have survived. So I think that's the first thing to say. And one of the and it's like fear. As I said earlier, we need fear. For example, we have very sophisticated fear systems, but we also need the ability to plan, right? And we have our amazing systems that can think through different complex situations and come up with the best, paths forwards, right? Even though they might be counterintuitive, we can be creative. So we can think about how war has shaped the brain, the challenges of conflict and life and death emergencies, which could be human against human or human against nature, has shaped the brain. And that's a lot of what the book is about. It's shaped our, even down to the visual system that we have, right? There are lots of animals that have much better color vision than humans, and the color vision than mammals. And why is that? Right, loads of lizards and birds and whatever, they have much better color vision than even shrimps. A lot of times shrimps can have better color vision than mammals. Why is that? It's because mammals were nocturnal animals, because we were the tiny little guys escaping the dinosaurs who were around in the daytime. Because we were nocturnal, we lost our color vision, our good color vision. We've never really quite got it back. So even down to the way we see the world, that's been shaped by the needs of conflict. On the other hand, then talking about, but just to say, I think I'm optimistic. So I think that that doesn't mean yes, our brains can drive us to war. Yes, our brains are built for conflict. But that's not all we're built for. And I think also, if we understand ourselves better, then we can hopefully avoid wars or make them less likely. I think we can never abolish war. We can make war less likely. Another way to think about the brain as well, in terms of the effect of war on the brain, is actually humans are much more resilient than we often think they are. So if you look at big reviews, for example, of post-traumatic stress disorder, and this is not something I'm minimizing in any way. People who have that, it can be really debilitating and it can be a really serious problem. But actually, and so that is essentially fear run amok. It's an post-traumatic stress disorder is an anxiety disorder. It's fear run amok. Now, actually, if you look at service personnel more broadly, they don't really have higher rates of PTSD than matched populations, civilian populations. And even if you then look at subpopulations, which is probably closer to like special operators who've seen a lot, done a lot of things, and they looked, for example, at Australian veterans from Vietnam who saw, people who were really in extreme combat, saw really terrible things, observed and received, bad wounds and all the rest of it, right? Really, really serious thing. Now, even then, it only goes up to about 1 in 3 having PTSD, what could be diagnosed as PTSD. So that means 2/3 don't, right? That's a lifetime prevalence.
Yeah.
So actually, another thing, again, and this is to be sort of, a bit more optimistic. And again, this is nowhere minimizing it for those people who do have it. But human brains, one of the things is that actually they really can be very, very resilient. And that's why, like, at the beginning of my book, I have a picture of my great uncle who fought. He was a British tank commander in World War II. And the photograph of he fought all the way from right at the beginning of the war. He was in Operation Torch and went up through Italy. And he was there right until literally fighting in flame-throwing tanks in April 1945. Sorry, right? So he was there for many, many years. He won a high award for bravery, the Military Cross. And I remember him, the picture at the beginning of the book is him on his 100th birthday, right, in Brighton, which is a town on the south coast. And he's holding my son, who was a baby at the time. And I remember him as like a happy man who, when I was a kid, he used to wheel me around his garden in a big wheelbarrow. And he was, 100th birthday, surrounded by happy family celebrating his birthday and all the rest of it. And I think humans are actually very resilient. And so I think that's another optimistic point to take home, is that partly because our brains are built to survive a lot of this type of life-threatening stuff, we're actually a lot more resilient than people often think.
Thanks for listening to On the X, the official podcast of the Navy SEAL Foundation and an Ironclad original series. Learn more at NavySealFoundation.org or text On the X to 60104. See you next time.